questions to our wonderful panel. Let's introduce the people that we have with us today. First of all, we have Penda Tomlinson, who is Senior Lecturer in BA and BSc Games Design at Middlesex University. Hey, Penda.
Hello.
We have Alice Bowman, who is Content Designer at Trailmix and a UEL alumni. Hey, Alice.
Hi.
We have Senar Carlton, who is Senior Producer at Maze Theory and one of our own MDX alum.
Pleasure to be here.
We have Martin Akehurt, who is Director and Designer at Fat Kraken, who is also a UEL alumni.
Hello.
And finally, we have Del Walker, who is a Senior Character Artist at Rocksteady Games and also an alum of De Montfort University. Hi, Del.
Hi, how's it going?
Thanks to everyone for joining us. We've got a lot of good questions to get through, but we do want to hear your questions. As we said before, do join in on menti.com to add your questions. The code to enter is 9130129. Sorry, that's 9130192 even. So let's get into the questions. The first one I'd like to ask is to Alice. Alice, did you always want to work in the games industry, or is it something that came to you later on?
I think the first thing I wanted to do was be a babysitter. That was like for a few years in junior school. And then like it changed all the time. The thing I wanted to do for a really long time was write. I knew I wanted to write something and kind of wanted to be an author, but just sort of didn't ever end up actually writing anything when I was like sitting down to do it. So I was like, okay, I probably can't do this. And then when I got to like sixth form and college, I dropped out of loads of different courses. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I started off with a media makeup BTech that I thought would lead me to doing like horror makeup for films. But I was really bad at it. And then I wanted to be a doctor briefly, but wasn't really good enough at the right subjects. And I had dropped out of college altogether and gone to work in an arcade when I was spending a lot of my free time playing video games, and I suddenly realized that people made them. So after that, I went to college to do a game development BTech and found that I did really well in all of my classes there, which is really nice. So kind of a first for me at that point. And after that, I kind of just didn't really look back. I went on to do game design at UEL and had fantastic lecturers and was really encouraged and really enjoyed what I was doing. And yeah, it's all gone really well. And I actually, in my current job, have ended up being able to do a bit of writing. So it kind of goes back to having always wanted to do that and have found the ability to actually sit down and write as well, which is good.
That's fantastic. So it came full circle.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wonderful. Del, I'm going to come to you next because you're specifically a character artist. So again, it'd be interesting to hear whether that is something that you knew you always wanted to do or how that developed over time.
Yeah, so I definitely didn't plan to be a character artist or be in games. I didn't know either of those two things were an option. For a long time. So perhaps like your students, it wasn't until I was roughly in like year 11 or 12, I guess, like around that time, I started considering something more visual. And so I jumped on a graphic design course. It was a BTech. And I didn't actually know, whether I wanted to be a graphic designer or whether I wanted to, pursue something to do with advertising. All I knew was I was pretty good at visual stuff. And it was while I was on that course, I think this is showing my age now, but Star Wars Episode 2 DVD came out. And the special features had an entire section on the concept artist and 3D artist who made the stuff for the movies. And you don't get DVD special features now anymore because everything streams. But back then, that was quite an insight. I mean, they were showing people whose job it was to basically create imagery for entertainment. And yeah, I just was like, well, is that a thing? Can I do that? And it was halfway through my BTech that I just looked up whether that was a course you could do, because UCAS started to become a discussion. It was like, what do you want to do? And parents are just like, you should be a doctor, and I'm just like, this is not going to happen. But then, I looked at options, and I saw there were actually quite a few entertainment design courses back then. They didn't have so much what they have now, which is most courses have deliberate game courses, which is much more tailored to what you actually need. But I did find a game art course, and I applied, and that was at De Montfort University, and they were hesitant to basically put me on automatically without interviewing me, because I had only had a history of graphic design, not necessarily anything to do with entertainment design or concept art or 3D. But I effectively made somewhat of like a body of work to show like, hey, I can draw really good, I know what I'm doing. And they took me on the course, and it was actually on the course that I found out there are, like, when you make a game, it's not you just like saying like, yeah, I've got an idea and I'm the idea guy, and you just like you just find it out. Like, there's so many different disciplines, and one of the disciplines that I was drawn to was making the characters for the game. So I spent 3 years bouncing around trying to figure that out, and subsequently managed to get a job at a studio that's actually now closed, called Blitz Games, where it was much more like family friendly oriented games, and that was 10 years ago. Yeah. But that kind of gives you an insight into my problem. I did want to bring up mostly the beginning, because it probably pertains to what your students are considering, where they're like, yeah, I'm into games, but I don't have any history of understanding it. It's like, now is a good time to actually think about how you're going to enter it.
Definitely. And similar to what Alice was saying, it's just that awareness that, first of all, yes, this is actually a career path. This is something that you can find that you're good at, and that you're interested in it, then it is a possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we can, come back to the debate around Star Wars Episode 2 later if we have time. One of the other things that was interesting is you both mentioned that you went through the BTEC route to then get to university. Martin, this is a good time to bring you in. Is that kind of the similar path that you took?
Well, I was going to say, it's very similar to to me. I didn't know I wanted to do games or anything like that. At first, I did a whole bunch of stuff like MVQs and catering and civil service and stuff like that after I left school. But I ended up going to university and studied philosophy and sociology for a year, and I really didn't enjoy it. I wasn't digging it at all. It's interesting, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't for me. And when I kind of dropped out of that, which was kind of quite a big, kind of real big decision to make, to go back and start again almost. It felt like it was what do I really want to do? And it was just the two things that I was actually passionate about were video games and films. So I was just let's apply for a bunch of courses in doing either film studies or game studies. And I ended up doing game studies, and I went into it kind of not knowing really that much, especially to my peers as well, who were on the course. Some of them were just far beyond where I was at the time, but just throwing myself in it and kind of doing it, and kind of embracing this new idea and of studying and video games, kind of learnt so much incredibly quickly, I think. But I think Penda can vouch for that. I don't know. But yeah, so that's how I kind of ended up in
that's great,
in video games.
And what was it like when you then went to university on the different course? What did you get from that when you were on the course that was actually relevant to what you wanted to go into?
It was kind of, I mean, the first year was probably a little bit of excitement of just being away from home again and actually getting there. But definitely into the second and third years, it was kind of, I feel I kind of more academically approached it, and understanding the theories and philosophies behind things. There's certain aspects that I'm still that I wasn't very great at, coding and kind of more the art side of stuff, but the actual theory behind design and things like that was what I really kind of got my head into. Kind of the idea of paper-based prototypes is still one of my favorite things to do. Even now I'm just draw it quickly on a piece of paper and how can we do this, and I love that stuff. Yeah, like, so it was definitely kind of, I engaged in it and so much more, even though there were still aspects of it I wasn't great at. It was still like, go for it and try it and do it. Like, yeah.
That's great. And you've mentioned Penda there. Penda, this is a good time to bring you in with 3 of your ex-students from UEL and Middlesex on the panel.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what do you want to know?
It would be great to hear from you about, obviously, we know that you're teaching, but how long have you been teaching games design for? And could you tell us a little bit about, what the different types of courses are out there on this topic?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm mostly going to speak to the Middlesex experience. So I've been teaching games design for 15 years. It makes me feel
and you're only
terribly
21.
old.
That's incredible,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely, eternally 21. It was some sort of deal I made. Let's not get into that now. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting to sort of hear Alice and Martin and Dale's sort of talking about sort of that realization. I think, unfortunately, I am significantly older than 21, and at the time that I was studying at university, there weren't any games design or even entertainment design courses. So I sort of spent probably 10 years working in various industries as a software developer, and did some games design. I also wrote and did a load of stuff as a hobbyist in pen and paper design. Pen and paper games design, so role-playing games and board games and playtesting and all of those kinds of things. So I sort of come from this weird place of having done this stuff as a hobbyist, and I came back to education in the early 2000s and studied a master's at Middlesex when it had a design for interactive media master's course. And that sort of connected me with that conversation that Martin was talking about of kind of academic and design as being a thing. And I think at Middlesex, particularly the games design course, which, caveat, I am program leader on the both BA and BSc games design, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think we have a very strong offering in terms of trying to map a whole load of practitioner stuff. So we've got a couple of practitioners who teach on it, me included. We have a bunch of sort of technical process stuff, but we also have some of that academic stuff, which is about honing people's writing and thinking skills, because I don't know, but I would say predominantly games design involves writing games design documents, pitching to people, writing emails, having conversations with people, maybe making a paper prototype every now and again that persuades somebody that the idea works, sometimes making a digital prototype. But all of that is about being able to communicate and being persuasive. So I think that's the thing that is that sort of linchpin of what we're doing in games design at Middlesex. We're very, very lucky. I think I appreciate it even more, given that I felt we were quite siloed in when I taught at UEL, which is how I know Martin and Alice. At Middlesex, we've got quite a big kind of ecology of different courses. So we collaborate with 3D animation and games, which is a kind of hybrid course that covers a whole bunch of kind of character design, 3D modeling, 3D animation, and how that fits into sort of different roles in games. So they cover a whole range of potential outcomes in terms of jobs, from technical artists through to animator and character artists. So I think they do quite a good job of kind of covering a significant portion of that kind of industry output. We also collaborate with illustration and graphic design. That's a little bit on and off. I think it depends on what projects our students get. We try and do an industry brief with our students in our second year, and some years that's been a very good way of kind of getting a load of different students from different cohorts to work together. We also occasionally collaborate with computer science, and have collaborated in the past with the music folks as well, who are, when we're actually physically on campus, that we share some kitchen facilities, so I end up chatting with people. I think that covers our core set of offerings that fit into games. I think we've got folks who've made music for games. We've got folks who've done programming for games who teach on computer science. So we cover, if you look at the credits on your favorite video game, we probably cover 3/4 of those things, and probably could find a course that would cover the rest.
That's amazing. I'm just struggling to think how all of that can fit into a 3-year course. There's so many different aspects to cover.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think we link up with a lot of people. So a lot of what we're trying to teach games designers is how to be that linchpin and vision holder. So a lot of what we're doing is getting people into the practice of writing different styles and like making stuff. But yes, it's difficult. I would love to run something that ran longer. I sort of envy some other institutions that have like that kind of MA tacked on, that you can sign up for like an Eng or whatever.
I'm not so sure that's a good idea to go down the MA route, if I'm honest. I think you guys have probably got it a bit neater.
Yeah, sure. I'm only saying it, I'd like more time with my students. I don't mean anything else by it.
Well, I suppose that's in partly maybe the choice that students get as part of the course to specialize in the area they want. So it's not that they have to do everything there. Maybe this actually is a good time to bring in Sanar as one of our own Middlesex alum. So Sanar, based on what you just heard from Penda and everything that gets taught in Middlesex, what was it like for you as an experience? And
well, let me just say, first of all, like getting into the industry, even getting into education, for like gearing myself up for games in general. I always had an interest in games from a very early age. So for me, it's quite different from the other panelists. So I always knew what I wanted to do, even though it was quite confusing in some ways, because even though I'd done games design as an educational degree, I ended up in production. So, but we'll get to that another time. But yeah, for me, it was more like being frustrated in school, in secondary school, not really having the capability to learn something, to gear myself towards that industry. So yeah, it wasn't really a great experience in that regard. But when I got into my BTEC, which also the other panelists did, I did a multimedia BTEC national diploma. That kind of held me in good stead to then try and search for a degree in games design. And probably me showing my age as well is games design wasn't around then. It was the first of its kind when I actually joined. So it was an interesting thing to be a guinea pig in a course that was just constructed. And thank God there was something out there, because I really needed to cling on to something that I could learn and figure out what I wanted to do. So I think for me, the course, as Penda said, it's multiple things. There's lots of things that are covered in games design. And I think for me, it was learning more about those modules of what makes game design, from the game design documents to the level design, to the world building, to the writing. And there's so much out there that you can't really cover. It's something that you probably need to go in with an understanding of what really interests you about games design, and try and specialize and make the best of it. So for me, I always was a person that really loved the vision of the games. I was always interested in the ideas, and everyone has an idea and everyone can come up with something, but having something that you can then materialize into something and create something special is something that I'm really passionate about. So for me, it was really difficult. Like Martin said, I'm not a coder. I'm not someone who could code or do anything technical. I'm more on the creative side. So for me, it was really challenging, but for me at the same time, it gave me a much better understanding of what I was up against and what I needed to do in order to pursue a career in games.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Sana. Gosh, yeah, as you kind of already illustrated again, based following on from what Penda was saying, just a number of different areas of the industry that you can get into. I'm going to start going to some of the questions that we've had through now from Menti. Some of these have come through across this week and were sent to us already. Some are coming through live. So my first one, we had a couple actually come in about diversity in the games industry. So if I can, I'll go to Alice first of all, just to get your perspective on, as a woman in games, have there been any barriers that you feel that you've had to kind of overcome, anything like that you've come across in your career so far?
So I've been really lucky, and most of the people that I've worked with have been not assholes, if I'm allowed to say that. And they've not made a problem out of there being a woman that wants to have a job at a company. And when I was at UEL, I think I was like one of two for most of, no, one of 3 or 4, but it dwindled as people sort of do tend to kind of drop out as a course goes on. And in my BTEC, I was the only girl, and that can be a little bit difficult. Like, you do get stupid comments, but I find that just working hard and kind of being a bit sassy to the other students was enough that it was kind of fine. And obviously, I had really supportive lecturers both at college and university, and so that was always good. I think that I'm sure Middlesex is the same, but when you're in a university environment, there's that kind of protection and that layer of there being someone you can go to if there's someone who's being harassing or giving any kind of problem. And I've not faced that problem myself that much. But I've also been quite lucky to come across some initiatives that have been encouraging women in games and things like that. I've had a bit of funding that was specifically for women in games to go and make a project. And I think the thing that you end up asking yourself is, do I have this job or do I have this opportunity because I'm a woman rather than because I'm the best applicant? And when I got to go to GDC, which is a really big games conference a few years ago, and I got given some really good advice there when I asked that question during a panel, and I was told, companies and projects want to succeed, they're going to pick the best applicant, and if you get picked, you're at least equal with anyone else who's not from a underrepresented group in games. Don't doubt your own abilities, because other people will do that for you. You are getting that opportunity because you're very good. So I'd say if you are considering it and you think it's going to be a problem for you because there's not enough or you think it's going to be difficult, it won't be as difficult as you're thinking. There will probably be some people who are stupid, but just ignore them. They're not worth worrying about. Yeah, and there's lots of opportunities out there with people who are trying to help with if you speak up about any problems you have, there will always be people who are on the right side of things that will help you out as well.
That's some brilliant advice. Thanks, Alice. Del, it'd be great to hear your perspective as well. Have there been any barriers or anything like that you've experienced so far in your career, and any advice you'd give people who are wanting to go into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I will try and be brief because this is a talk within itself, really, if we're not careful. But I guess I can talk about the mental barrier of just not necessarily understanding that someone that looks like you is just as able to do these things, or making the assumption that people that do this job got in that job because of things or opportunities that were afforded to them that you don't necessarily have. When it's I always use the example of Mae Jemison. She was the first female Black astronaut, and she actually signed up for NASA, incredibly competent chemical engineer, but she actually signed up for NASA based on the fact that she saw Uhura, the Black woman in Star Trek, and feeling oh, right, okay, this is something I would like to do too. And
Yeah.
Seeing it is giving me permission almost to say yeah, there's no reason why I couldn't. And then her being chosen out of 20,000 applicants just came from her merits. And so I think the discussion of diversity is twofold. One, you have the problem that you somewhat do need to see people like you doing this thing to just help give you permission to be oh yeah, that's also an option for me, whether it be subconscious or not. And another fact as well is when you're in an industry that is becoming more and more about a push for AAA, even when you look at indie games or smaller scaled games, these are extremely talented people working on these things. This is no longer just 3 or 4 people working in their bedroom who don't really know what they're doing. An indie game is made up of very intelligent, often senior people, and so you have this problem where you have a lot of senior people or people who have a lot of experience. But then whenever they're looking for a peer or another co-worker, or they need a new designer or a new artist, they're often looking for people with experience, which means you're now looking at who was in the games industry 10 years ago.
Yes,
So
yeah.
you're always behind. So you're always going to have that issue of like not as much diversity until there are more programs and schemes that introduce avenues for juniors, where the playing field is much more level. Yeah, so I do want to bring up the fact that like, yeah, diversity is not as good as it should be. And when I say as good as it should be, I mean like games will be better with more diversity. Like even so much as to use the example of the television show Friends, it went 9 seasons based in New York, and for 9 seasons there's no black role with a recurring role name, like who has a name who has a recurring role. But if you're working on the project and it's all made up of one type of person, you might just not notice that. You could just go 8 or 9 seasons and just, because there's no one in there just saying like, hey guys, like, have you ever thought about this to make this more authentic? I'm not sure if you've seen the book before, but it doesn't look like this. So yeah, it's not a question of like trying to fill in the gaps of like, oh, let's make sure we tick boxes. No one's looking for incompetent candidates. They're looking for very competent people. We're just trying to find a way of making sure all the competent candidates come from a broader field. And yeah, I'm seeing personally, I can't talk for other studios, but because I'm not working at them, but personally in my studio, I feel like we're making really good pushes to like open up that field to like, how can we improve our hiring processes? How can we make new rooms for juniors, which
that's great.
It's something, you know, students will benefit from, and the people from diverse backgrounds should benefit from.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Dale. And again, I think it corresponds to what Alice was saying about that message of believing in yourself. You know, if you get an opportunity, if you get a role, believing it's because you were the best candidate for it, and not assuming you were put there to fill a quota, because the industry benefits from having a mixture of people working on the game so that they can be sold and, you know, be relevant to the wider audiences out there.
Yeah, it's business, not a charity.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you both for the perspectives on that. That's really helpful. Penda, I've got a question for you actually that you might be able to help with that we've had sent in. It's been sent through from a prospective international student who wants to know about what the process is to an international student has to go through to get into the games industry in the UK. I was wondering if you might be able to add something to that.
I think that's a very, very complicated question on one level. I think generally getting into university as an international student is a fairly straightforward, smooth process. We have an international department at the university that helps you sort all of those things out and will walk you through getting whatever paperwork you need done. Obviously, that's a changing landscape at the moment in the UK, and visas may be required from European states soon to study here. I don't know what's going to happen with that. Obviously, if you're outside the Eurozone and various other affiliates, it's a little bit more complicated. You have to get what's called tier 4 visa, which has a few more requirements attached to it, like we have to monitor your attendance a bit more. So that's sort of the university experience of it. But otherwise, it's actually quite a well-supported route. We get probably 3 or 4 students on a regular basis. Sometimes we get sort of a big year where either there's a group of people from one institution or one location who've all applied together. That's happened a couple of times. And I think probably every international student I've ever had has improved the cohort, even when we've had like visitors. So I remember Sen's year, we had, for Sen's first year, we had an international student from Germany who's now a doctor, a medical doctor, if I remember correctly, because he retrained after having been a computer scientist for many years, Dom.
Yep.
And another from Brazil, who both of whom contributed fantastically to the course, and I think helped everybody develop new skills and appreciations for different cultures. So I think it's delightful to have an open university that can get people in from around the world as much as anything else. In terms of working, I think if you're a good candidate, an employer will help you sort out a visa. I think that gets complicated. I know students in the past after graduation who've wanted to work for studios in the United States, or I can't remember where they ended up. I think it was Singapore, who had a bit of a long-winded recruitment process, because they have to stand as your guarantor. The company that you end up going and working for has to stand as a guarantor. Sometimes that works really, really smoothly and it's really good. Sometimes it gets complicated because it depends on a whole load of other political matters to do with immigration, which changes every day in all over the world. So I think the trick is to be really good, and people will go out of their way to help you get that visa or whatever it is that you need.
That's
Ultimately,
great. Thanks,
I'm afraid.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. Senna, I've got a question here that I'd like to come to you next on, based on something you mentioned earlier about your experience. So this question is as follows. I'm really interested in getting into the surrounding areas in the games industry, like production and that sort of thing, rather than the hardcore programming as such. What would be your advice into how to get into that side of the industry? And this is from one of our third-year game students.
Well, the way I managed to do it is through QA. So I built up a good kind of knowledge and experience in the development process, and understanding what my role was in the grand scheme of making a game. And it's a really, for me, it was an integral part into understanding not only production, but games design and all the other elements that come together, because you see it from deep within the game. You're actually playing it and breaking down the game and finding bugs and just figuring out how things work. So for me, it was more of working my way up the ladder in QA and get into a senior position where I could look from a more of a project management perspective to understand how to delegate work, how to organize bugs and critical issues and things like that. And that kind of naturally transitioned me into more of a production manager, product owner type position, where I was able to move away from more of the technical bug tracking stuff that I found really tedious for doing for God knows how long, into something that I really enjoy doing, which is more of the management of the team, management of the vision, management of the day-to-day tasks every day, which is something that I find really I'm inspired and passionate about, because it's something that you get to work with these talented people every day that create these amazing things. So for anyone that's trying to get into production, if you're going straight into the industry and trying to find out production roles, it's really difficult. You need that experience. So for me, ideally, I would say find a way in first and build your kind of experience, knowledge of how games are developed before you can kind of move on into a more product focused role.
That's great, thank you. Just for anyone who's maybe a prospective student, what's QA and what does that look like?
Oh, sorry, is that still?
Yeah, just go back to
yeah. Sorry, what's the question?
So what does QA stand for, and what does that mean?
Quality assurance. So, you know, you're the front line in the frontline defense in figuring out any issues and logging issues. And the thing about QA is people can really get into these games and find out things you would never ever realize you could potentially do. I mean, gamers do that to a certain extent when they're playing. That's why you get some of these amazing videos that show how they've manipulated the system to do all sorts of things, speed runs, for example. For QA, people see it as just a job to track bugs, but it's something to really get into and to really understand the system and how it works. So for me, it's more about knowing that side of thing. If you really want to move into other areas of the industry and you know, build that kind of experience, it's really important not to look at it just you know, finding bugs and things like that. It's more about, you know, where is that going to take you and how you're going to utilize that knowledge to move into you know, a position that you want to go into. So QA for me is I champion that a lot, because I feel it's the entry level to a lot of roles in the industry, and it's similar to like a runner in a film, in a movie set. But for QA, it's such an important role. And in the past, for me, I believe that, you know, those type of roles don't get the respect they deserve, because obviously you're the little guy in the cog trying to make things work and fix things, and talking to developers, for example, can always be a difficult situation, because you're telling them, you know, how things are broken, and they're there trying to fix it, and they're saying that their code is not great, and you get into all these kind of arguments with them. So I think it's a great position to start out in the industry, and I think you can utilize that to its extent.
That's very useful. Yes, you only need to watch some of those videos of glitched speedruns from games a decade ago to know how important QA is.
Yeah, it's problem solving, and it starts from QA, and that's how the developers get to then fix it. So it's a really integral part to game development. And I you know, like I said, it's not easy, it's tedious, it's hard, it's grindy, but essentially it's something that I think would you know, really benefit people if they really want to get involved in that side of it, particularly.
That's great, thanks. Martin, I'd like to pull you in at this point, if that's all right. Just tell us about maybe some of the coolest projects that you've worked on in your career so far. It would just be
coolest.
Yeah, just to kind of hear some examples of work from your perspective.
But I was just going to back like what Sanaa was saying about like QA, like because I come from a QA background, and that's how we met as well. Sanaa as well. Like when we coolest project, we worked on Devil May Cry DMC together. That's quite a cool one.
I knew I recognized you from somewhere.
But yeah, so I started like going into QA. My first job was working with like on the Lego games. So doing like, and that was very heavy, like QA, like I think I did the graveyard shift. So it was like 11 o'clock at night until like 7 o'clock in the morning, testing Pirates of the Caribbean, Lego Pirates of the Caribbean, and like Harry Potter's years 5 to, I don't know, 7, I think, I can't remember off the top of my head. So that was very much like more like intense, like bug numbers, find every bug you can in a build, and kind of maybe do some crazy hours to do a 100% playthrough, like just to do it by yourself and get it done, make sure that all works. And then like kind of various projects you kind of get more and more involved with, and you learn a little bit more. Like when I worked on Oddworld New and Tasty, Just Add Water, and that was when I really started just getting like my feet in everything, because I was QA, but I started doing a little bit of design to help out the designer there. Then I ended up doing a bit of art to help out the artist there. Then I ended up helping the audio guy there, and kind of and slowly, like now I became the guy who kind of knew most departments in one level. Yeah. And because I'm regularly talking to the engineers, like I also knew how like everything worked. So it's just like, oh, this kind of works like this. Both design, I know the design side of it, and I also know like on the code side, on the engineering side. So like breaking things becomes like, oh, I can easily break that. Okay, go back and have a look at it, because you can just see it like from talking to every aspect of the like development. You learn like I can 100% see where this falls apart, and this comes back as well to what Penda was saying about communication. Like having those design specs and design things as QA, in some studios, you end up writing a lot of that, of like how things technically work as well, and how things like, I don't know if anyone else has had the same experience with that, but like kind of you'll write up like if there's no documentation or something, so you end up writing it out. So then that becomes the source of knowledge, and they say who writes it, and it's you. So you become the knowledge keeper, if you will. And like that's like massively helped me like in my career of just like throwing myself at everything almost. It's hard work, and you end up doing a lot more hours and whatnot, but you find it interesting. And yeah, sorry, I've not really said many projects I've worked on, but like, yeah.
That's a great tip, I suppose, for anyone going into the industry in terms of how to make the most of the experience they're going to get through a job. It's just, as you say, help out a person here or there to learn about what they're working on.
Also, like kind of with like depending on the project, with like also who you're working with. Like I've done like kind of a lot of crunch in the past as well, but like because of the people I've worked with, it's become like kind of like you're almost like, I hate the term, but like family, and you end up like kind of doing those long shifts together, having a beer at the end, and you're just like so tired. You've been doing it for a little while, but there's a big like communal support. And like I know there's certain games that I've worked on, like if I call them up, it's just we always talk about the game still, but it's like we're bonded in a different way now. Like,
Yeah.
someone once said, if you didn't work with us, you'll never understand. And I'm just like, okay, but that's not hardly the truth. But yeah, it's like that. And it's great sometimes. Not all the
That's
time,
really
but
helpful.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. As is with any career, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. You have your good days, you have your bad days.
Brilliant. Well, let's go through some more of the questions we've had in. We've got one here. I'll open this up to the panel for anyone who wants to chip in. I'm interested in becoming an animator. What qualifications and maybe beyond that experience do I need? Penda, maybe do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's quite a complicated thing to unpack. I think you don't need any qualifications necessarily. It depends on what kind of person you are. I think I've come across excellent animators who are self-taught or have followed a bunch of tutorials on the internet and have built up from there. But if we're talking about sort of courses, we do 3D animation and games here at Middlesex, and 2D animation course as well. And they're both really, really good and will walk you through the process of developing an idea through pitch to actually making stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd probably jump on that as well, as like saying, you know, if that's something you're interested in, as to pretty much everything that's been mentioned here, all of the disciplines, it's good to get a little bit of an idea of what it is you want to do, and then take the time to understand the path that someone took to get there. I mean, for almost all things, but maybe not programming so much, all of the disciplines you can get through without an extremely solid academic route. You can just have a strong body of work. And if you're interested in animation, then I would say, yeah, look at the courses available to you, but also jump on Vimeo and just type in like junior animator showreel to see what these people have as a body of work that got them a job. So it will just like clear things in your mind that like, okay, cool. Now I know what I need to get out of the courses I do, because it doesn't really matter what course you do or where. A lot of this work is going to be on your own back to do. You know, when we're not in high school anymore. So it's up to you to like formulate this idea in your mind of what the role is and how you can apply the briefs that are given to you to help you get closer to that path. Yeah, that's just my advice.
That's a wonderfully specific piece of advice that anyone can do. You know, if there's a job out there that you want, Google to find the people who currently have it and what they had to produce to get there. Just look for the show role. I think that's a brilliant tip, Del.
Just to chime in on that too, I'd just like to say as well that, you know, there's a lot more tools out there now than there ever was before.
Yeah.
You know, when we started, there wasn't much, and now you see there's so much for open source stuff as well. So there's really no excuse, to be honest with you. I think people out there should really, if they're really passionate about what they want to do, there's stuff out there that can help them. And I definitely believe that, you know, with the tutorials, with university, with tools that you can apply yourself, you can get that portfolio, you can put that stuff together. So, and I'm sure, like I said, you know, there are some expenses involved, but essentially a lot of this stuff is open source and you can create something for yourself. And I believe that's something that people should definitely consider if they want to get in this industry, if they don't want to go through the other means that we discussed.
Yeah, I just want to add a few sentences to that, because definitely what you said, Sana, it rings really true with me. Like, I know so many people when that, like, for example, they want to get into music production and they're like, yeah, I really want to do this. And they understand, okay, there are different divisions or departments. You have the lyricist, you have the songwriter, you have the person who makes the production of the beat or the instrumental. Like, you can just get on YouTube and just say, how do I introduce myself to this? What software do I need to do? And you could be doing it within a few hours. You could do the exact same thing with every discipline we've mentioned here, in terms of like, okay, I need to get an understanding of, like, you know, a 3D package. Most of the solid ones are free, or a game engine to get my idea around how I would actually design a level. Or even as I'm sure, Alice, you could probably jump in and cite some good resourceful tips or packages that even teach you how it would be that you would construct like writing, or what things people would be looking for. It's all there and all available for you to get an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you guys are all saying is completely true. And I've been in a position now where I've interviewed people and like helped select who we're hiring at the company and things like that. And we do look way more at what's in your portfolio and what you have demonstrably done than like how you got to that point. So there's so many resources out there. If you search like game engine or animation tools, things like that, you'll find stuff. You'll find people who write articles going through all of that. But also, if you look at itch.io and the Humble bundles, there's quite often things that will come up that will be resources for learning how to make games or learning how to animate things or write things. You know, there's all sorts of stuff you can get, and a lot of it's very cheap or free. So it's definitely worth looking at. And you know, if you're going through the university route, it's useful to have that like extra knowledge alongside whatever you're learning with your degree as well.
Yeah, from what Alice is saying as well, like when we look at applicants, the first thing we do is look at their like portfolio. There's like like past that test, normally it's like kind of like sorry, but like even if there's a portfolio that's not quite right for us, we tend to give feedback on it because they put effort and time into it, and like maybe give them advice like when people apply for our studio anyway, because like you can see they care and they took a lot of effort in it, so you tend to get a lot of advice like that way as well. Just
Penda, did you want to come in with a final tip on following on from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a kind of a tricky bridging that sort of is difficult to kind of get right. I think all of those resources are out there, but it's sometimes quite difficult to get into them early on in your career, or if you're just coming out of school. I think the best students that I've had in recent years have messed around with things like Roblox or doing some modding with different game engines. They haven't necessarily got a complete set of skills from watching YouTube or messing around with stuff, but they've definitely sort of had a play and tried to make something. And I would say lots of modding communities are really, really supportive of beginners and will help you out. So getting involved in a project where there are other people doing it as well is a really good experience, full stop. And it might give you some idea of what it's like to work in the games industry. Maybe. Obviously, volunteer modding projects can...
Just to chime in on that again, I think as well, I mean, the university route can also build your portfolio. So, you're creating that with the lecturers giving you that information, guiding you and giving you a structure. So I think there's so many different avenues you can go down to really make use of whatever way feels more comfortable for you. I mean, if you're like me and not artistically creative and cannot code, I mean, QA is probably the right way for you. But if you want to go down any other routes and you're more creative and more artistic or more technical, then there's definitely other ways you can go as well.
Everyone, thank you so much. I know that we could go on for hours and hours. It's so wonderful to have all of these tips in one place. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. You've all been fantastic. Sorry that we have to end it there and call it to a close. Before our audience goes, for everyone who's watching, please do go over to menti.com. We have a very, very quick 10-second poll just for you to fill in to help us understand a bit more about how you found this session. Please do look out for our other Middlesex sessions on things like writing a personal statement, applying to university, as well as our digital creators camp and much, much more. Everything is on the Middlesex website. Once more, a big round of applause virtually, and thank you to our fantastic panel for that discussion, with all of those tips and insights. You've all been amazing. Thank you very, very much for coming along this afternoon, and we'll close it there. So thank you very much for watching, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.